Hello, I'm going to talk about contradictions in Veiled Nation, shown in The Souls of the Black Folk, written by W.E.B. Du Bois. At the beginning of The Souls of Black Folk, written in 1903, W.E.B. Du Bois goes back to his boyhood in New England to search his first memory of a vast veil which shut him out from the white world. Veil is one of the key concepts expressed throughout the Souls of Black Folk, which illuminates the isolated position of black race in American society. At the same time, Veil is an essential figure of Du Bois's early social theory of race relations in the United States, widely used in his other scholarly books and political works. It has provided universal dimensions to the work, falling between the white and the black worlds, and approaching to both of them. How does the veil highlight the multiple dimensional aspects of the social problem and entail the opposing perspectives of white and black people? Identifying this metaphor, the true nature of color line and racial discrimination can be found. Also, analyzing its double-sidedness helps to embrace Du Bois's sociological view on paradoxes of the chaotic nation torn apart by the race after the Civil War. It suggests wider viewpoints as well as meaningful guidance for divided races, symbiotic relationship, which still has relevance for contemporary world in which society is remained separated by numerous otherized in politics, races, gender, and class. Many sociologists credited Du Bois with major contributions to sociology, especially for his theory of veil, double consciousness, which is believed to be a universal concept that explains the lives of African Americans in general. As veil signifies the common experience of black people, the Souls of the Black Folk was written for gentle readers on both sides, for whites who had drawn the color line after the collapse of Reconstruction era, and for black people who were under the veil. Veil is a key aspect of divided communication, culture, and structure of the people and their society. It is not a natural essential being. Rather, it is a socially constructed phenomenon on account of social environments intended to classify certain people and cut them off. It resides in the structure as well as culture of society and imposed on person's identity. Unnoticed and subtle or aggressive and overt, in any shape or form, it limits and biases visions of the races. In order to get rid of the veil, Du Bois repeatedly highlights the significance of race contract. The problem is that the actual process of interaction between two races is so subtle and unsighted. As Du Bois says, the casual observer visiting the South sees at first little of this. Underlying connection probably exists, but it is working invisibly. The unresolved difficulty, according to Du Bois, comes from lack of interaction in daily lives. He tries to depict the problem as follows. I have thus far sought to make clear the physical, economic, and political relations of the Negro and white in South. But after all, there still remains a part essential to the proper description of the South, which is it is difficult to describe or fix. It is in fine the atmosphere of the land, the thought and feeling, the 1,001 little actions which go to make up life. In any community or nation, it is these little things which are most elusive to the grasp and yet most essential to any clear conception of the group life taken as a whole. But that observer would quickly notice the contradiction which people embrace and live with. According to Du Bois, he realizes at last that silently, restlessly, the world about flows by him in two great streams. They ripple on in the same sunshine. They approach and mingle their waters in seeming carelessness, then they divide and flow wide apart. As the observer noticed, Veil in the Souls of the Black Folk reveals several public or personal contradictions that occur in racially divided nation. Black people and white people seem totally separated in two different worlds, but they are interrelated. Each side is only comprehensible in its relationship to the other. Externally, central paradox lies at the cross-racial economic system in which black people and white people, politically and socially divided, are necessitated to cooperate and work together in some degree. Although each side is formed its own culture and community, as mentioned in the Souls, quoted, They go to separate churches. They live in separate sections. They are strictly separated in all public gatherings. They travel separately and they are beginning to read different papers and books. End of the quote. They coexisted in the country's economic situation. White landlords and merchants employed black people as a new kind of debt slavery by holding a mortgage on everything that they need in their daily lives. Obviously, white people and black people weren't given an equal opportunity. However, eventually both sides lost their chance of benefit under the system according to Du Bois's description of the economic relations in the cotton fields of Dougherty County, Georgia. Thus, we have a laborer without capital and without wages, and an employer whose capital is largely his employees' wages. It is an unsatisfactory arrangement, both for hirer and hired, and is usually in vogue on poor land with hard-pressed owners. Due to the high rate of interest and unending poverty, African Americans were demoralized and lost their motives, which led to the decrease in production, and followingly, white people couldn't receive the estimated amount. It was an inefficient system for both white landlords and black workers, but they had no other choice. Du Bois also points out the paradox in which white people opposing to the increase in black people's access to higher education. As implied in Of the Coming of Joan chapter in the book, many southern states projected their antipathy to higher education for African Americans to their laws because they considered it dangerous as it unnecessarily brings in ideas about human rights and equality. On the contrary, Du Bois believed that such repression and discrimination on black people would eventually provoke much more dangerous consequences and social disorder. His argument was also founded upon the blinding features of the veil, which makes white people disregard the other side of the society and be ignorant to the mutual relationship between two races. He stressed that what is good for African Americans is also good for Southern whites. If African Americans' rights and opportunities are ensured, it would ultimately affect their society, and the social order would not get threatened. Internally, contradictions is shown under Veil's basic theme of sight and insight. The movement, it distorts and obscures one's perception of self as well as the opposite side. Misunderstandings arise. As white people can only see black people through the veil, black people can only see white people within the veil, which covers up their vision. Thus, they are doomed to fail in seeing white people as they are. The veil also penetrates to the core of a person's identity, imposing on false self-consciousness. It disturbs self-recognition and brings second sight of consciousness to the person who is under the veil. What they are becomes less a matter than how they see themselves and how they are seen. Thus, simultaneously, they see themselves through the eyes of white people, which had been interrupted by the veil. Social constraints and other negative valuations of their race are internalized, causing them to devaluate themselves and lose their confidence. People outside the veil are also affected during the process. In order to distinguish and exclude the other, the veil blinds those who do not wish to view the other side. In his sociological study about the veil in 1994, Charles Lamert named it as a decided blindness, originated from active or passive complicity of white people toward the black people and to the recurring effects on themselves. Its result is implied in the Du Bois' story about what happens in the southern town and the city. Both whites and black people see commonly the worst of each other. Consequently, Veil breaks into the interior perspective of both members of the society, recomposes individual self-consciousness, and spoils and obscures their vision toward the opposite side as well as the opposite side's vision toward them. Then their views become solidified, generalizing and rejecting each other. In a conclusion, Veil performed as a bisector of American society, but at the same time it was an evidence of two conflicting but interacting systems' contradictions and their reciprocal relationship. Lynn England and W. Keith Warner quotes an unpublished note from The Negroes of Farmville written in 1898 as a metaphor to explain their correlationship. It is two worlds separate yet bound together, like those double stars that bound for all time wheel round each other separate yet one. Two sides interact with dominant and distortion, characterizing the cross-veil dynamics. In order to reconstruct the divided nation, Du Bois radically pursued the cooperative and symbiotic relationship between two races by means of achieving racial development and equality. Work, culture, liberty, all these we need, not singly but together, not successively but together, each growing and aiding each, and all striving toward that vaster ideal that swims before the Negro people, and the ideal of human brotherhood, gained through the unifying ideal of race, the ideal of fostering and developing the traits and talents of the Negro, not in opposition to or contempt for other races, but rather in large conformity to the greater ideals of the American Republic, in order that someday on American soil, two world races may give each other to each those characteristics. His belief was that although black people are gifted with second sight from the veil, they also have a potential to fight back negative self-reflected derived from the veil. In order to do so, he strongly asserted the importance of internal advancement of nourishing their self-consciousness as well as the development in the scale of the race. He claimed that they deserve discipline, strength, support, and solidarity, which derive from their hardships, and they can create a base from which the entire structure can be reformed and the whole nation can be reunited. Applying Du Bois's principles of the veil offers an insight into those who are marginalized and excluded in our society. It also brings us a better understanding of conditions and treatment of those people that are silenced and obscured even in present day. The veil did not vanish with modernity. Instead, it has constantly changed its working method, forms, and targets. Adapting it to contemporary divisive issues of racism, sexism, and different types of otherizing, the concept can bring in useful sights for the world. These days, there are multiple veils which can cut across society. Those veils embrace ideas of racism, sexism, or classism, which overlaps, interacts, and entangles and makes it more complicated to resolve. Many theorists of the Reconstruction era attribute to the continued existence of multiple societal veils to conquirer and the schism between the conquirer and the conquired. Many features of the veil can still be found in today's social dilemmas. Most prominently, people choose to be blind to certain groups of people that they do not want to see. The problem is that the veil would affect both sides and no one can assure that the other side is negligible. Furthermore, even if they want to see the other side clearly, they will inevitably fail, for people on this side can never see the other side clearly through the veil. Their vision will only receive the distorted and incorrect figures of the other side. Alienated and disadvantaged people in society are at a risk of seeing distortion version of themselves through the revelation of the other world. Dominant people standards and goals will be imposed on them within the veil. Thus, false self-consciousness would lastingly be internalized, and they would judge themselves with the other's perspective and their values. As a result, they might lose their confidence, give up self-determination, or lose their will. In reality, double consciousness is being utilized in many structures of dominations and discrimination. As for racism, the apparent form of veil has quelled and changed into subtle and indirect form in many countries, which became impersonal, scientific, and rational. However, political domination followed by illegal authority and pre-existing economic situations sustain the inequality in the underlying system. In addition, even now when different races can join together and interact much more often, because their culture have developed separately throughout the long history, misunderstanding and dissonance frequently arise. This monument is located in Tuskegee University, which showed the black man his veil being removed by Booker T. Washington. The veil within its continuous presence provides universal perception to the modern day about the existing social problems and issues. Moreover, it proposes a new direction. If the paradoxes of the veil are considered, we will be able to grasp the essential figures of the discrimination, segregation, and oppressions inside the society. Efforts toward recognizing and removing modern veils, which connotates Du Bois's enlightened sociological view on the weaker side of the world, will be the key for the better future.